Jefferson didn't wake up one day as the country we know today. What's happening now didn't start with protests, sanctions, or headlines. It started with a revolution meant to end authoritarian rule, and instead created a system that has lasted for decades. To understand Iran today, you have to understand how that revolution happened and what went wrong. In the decades before 1979, Iran was ruled by Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah. On the surface, the country looked modern, especially in major cities. Western clothing was common. Women weren't legally required to cover. Universities, nightlife, and public life resembled what you might expect in Europe or the United States. But politically, Iran was something very different. Power was centralized almost entirely in the Shah. Elections existed, but outcomes were controlled. Opposition parties were banned or neutralized. Independent newspapers were censored. Peaceful reform wasn't just discouraged, it was impossible. Students, intellectuals, and leftist groups were watched closely. Universities were surveilled. Protests were broken up. People were arrested not for violence but for speech. The Shah's secret police became a tool of fear, and even those who never encountered it directly knew someone who had. The contradiction became unbearable. Iran was modern but not free. Wealthy but unequal, stable on the surface, deeply unaccountable underneath. By the late 1970s, opposition came from everywhere at once. Religious conservatives saw Westernization as an attack on Iranian identity. Leftists and students rejected authoritarian rule. Workers and merchants felt shut out of the country's growing wealth. Different groups wanted different futures, but they all agreed on one thing: the Shah had to go. What made revolution inevitable wasn't just dissatisfaction. It was the fact that the Shah closed off every peaceful alternative. When reform becomes impossible, pressure doesn't disappear, it explodes. By 1978, protests were nationwide. Strikes paralyzed the economy. Even parts of the military began to hesitate. In January 1979, the Shah fled Iran. When the Shah left, there was real hope. Political prisoners were freed. Censorship collapsed. Millions believed they were witnessing the birth of a freer Iran. But revolutions don't just remove leaders, they create power vacuums. And the group best prepared to fill that vacuum was led by Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Khomeini had positioned himself as a moral figurehead against the Shah. Crucially, he was vague about what would come next. That allowed different groups to project their own hopes onto him. Democracy, justice, reform. But once in Iran, his movement moved fast. Rather than waiting for a transitional government, Khomeini's supporters built parallel power immediately. Revolutionary committees took control of neighborhoods. Revolutionary courts began issuing sentences without due process. Militias enforced order in the streets. At the same time, political disagreement was reframed as counter-revolutionary, not opposition, but betrayal. Many Iranians realized within months that the revolution was being hijacked. Newspapers were shut down. Women's rights were rolled back. Secular and leftist groups were sidelined, then crushed. By the time a constitution was proposed, the balance of power was already settled. Clerical authority was written into law, locking the system in place. Fear, speed, and organization did what ideology alone could not. What followed was not just political change, but total transformation. Under the new system, repression expanded from politics into daily life. Dress, speech, belief, and behavior became matters of state enforcement. The revolution that promised dignity replaced selective repression with permanent control. That system still governs Iran today. The supreme leader who emerged from that framework has ruled for decades, presiding over a country facing immense internal pressure, economic strain, generational unrest, and growing challenges to legitimacy. What's striking is that one of the most visible alternative figures now is Reza Pahlavi, the son of the man the revolution overthrew. He represents a radically different future and is openly aligned with Western governments. Whether he ever takes power is uncertain, but the fact that history has circled back to this point says something profound. Iran's current crisis didn't begin today. It began when a movement meant to end authoritarian rule hardened into a system that no longer allows meaningful change. And until that unresolved history is confronted, Iran's struggle and the world's relationship with it will remain unfinished.